Welcome everyone. It is 3 p.m. and it's time for the Server Room Show. This is episode 68. Today we continue what we have started at episode 67, the episode about AIX. This is gonna be part 2 of the continuation of that very same episode. This is episode 68. I had to make it a two-part episode because I was running out of time as always on episode 67, and I realized that I had more than enough material for a part 2, and actually it's good because I broke it up to a prologue where I talked about me and operating systems and some systems and home computers I came across during my infancy and my early years, and I talked about AIX and a little bit about its history, and I started to comment one of the tools about AIX, which is called SMIT, System Management Interface Tool, and that you can interact with the system using this tool of SMIT. Through the terminal or through as a GUI application if you wish, if you are under an X Windows system, and you can learn it also to not just to configure certain things but to learn a lot about AIX. You can use the F6 key to look at the command which SMIT would run for you, or what SMIT would generate for you, what it would invoke, and like that you can learn how to do things in AIX regarding the system configuration, and because SMIT also logs and saves the commands you tell them to do, or the actions you tell them to do. You can use these bits and pieces both for auditing and also to build scripts with these files, because you can execute these scripts in the shell and you can rerun system configuration tasks. So it's really a versatile utility, and if nowhere else, you can start learning about SMIT and the system management interface tool in AIX when you have a chance. I will talk about more ways to learn about AIX just in a short while. Another piece I have to mention regarding AIX is Object Data Manager, ODM. I wanted to mention this because it's very similar to something we probably all know, which is the registry in Microsoft Windows, and this is analogous to that piece of tool or that piece of technology, because ODM, Object Data Manager, is a database of system information integrated into AIX, and the best it compares is to Windows's registry. A good understanding of the ODM is essential for managing AIX systems. Data managed in ODM is stored and maintained as objects with associated attributes. Interaction with ODM is possible via application programming interface API library for programs and command line utilities such as ODM show, ODM get, ODM add, ODM change, and ODM delete for shell scripts and users. SMIT and its associated AIX commands can also be used to query and modify information in the ODM SMIT, which I've just mentioned, and I mentioned in the last part of episode 67. Example of information stored in ODM database are network configuration, logical volume management configuration, installed software information, information for logical devices or software drivers, list of all AIX supported devices, physical hardware devices installed and their configuration, menus, screens, and commands that Smith uses. Now we will go to what I would like to call the second part of 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 this episode, of this whole AIX two-part episode. The first part was talking about the history of AIX a little bit and my infancy and those things I mentioned. And now we will talk about my experience with AIX. We will talk about people who helped me from the AIX community and to whom I am grateful for their support. I will talk about AIX community and the literature more specifically, where you can start to learn about AIX on your own. And one of the most important parts is how to get your hands on IBM AIX. Not free, but how to get your hands on it. I will have to say that with AIX, my experience is zero, is null, nothing. The thing is that AIX community is much smaller in size than, for example, when you think about the Linux community, and somehow it reminds me more of a secret society with a lot of secrecy around it. It means that for a newcomer it's pretty much impossible to get any exposure to it or any experience with it, with AIX, and sometimes even harder to find someone who is willing to help you to start your journey with AIX. Therefore, I have to I want to give special thanks to Andrey Klyachkin from power-devops.com. I have his link for his website in the show notes, and also in the description of these two episodes, who helped me to get up and running with a small AIX server on the cloud in a matter of hours. Andrey has a vast experience in AIX administration, and he's a very pleasant person to talk to. Please check out his website at power-devops.com, or sometimes you guys call this power-devops.com. It's the minus sign for me, so you can figure out how it's called in your region. I normally call it the minus sign, power-devops.com. The link is in the show notes and in the description. The reason being that he most probably will be able to answer your questions regarding AIX operating system and the use of DevOps tools on it. Before I contacted or came across Andrey, I had no idea, for example, what we will discuss later, that you can run on the cloud a little AIX server, virtual machine of your own for a very, very affordable price. I was completely not aware of this. The AIX community and literature. The thing is that there are some articles on the web about AIX and some blogs and some quite good and great sites to not as many as I mentioned about Linux, because most probably because of the size of the community, it's much smaller, so the content which is created, or the blogs or the articles created around it, around AIX, is also less. There is one called AIX for admins.blogspot.com. AIX, the number for admins.blogspot.com. It's very good. You can also get to or go to Reddit at -r-AIX, but I found it to be mostly for people who has already experience with AIX and have all the required access to the tools and the utilities required. So I'm not sure the Reddit community of AIX would be the one where I would go to. I also know that if I'm not mistaken, there is an AIX IRC channel on Freenode. So if you don't want to give a chance to read it, and then maybe you can look at the IRC channel, and maybe people willing to help you or put you in the good direction. I have to say that because of the size of the AIX community, as mentioned previously, and the slightly reserved nature of most of its members, I came across personally, it is not a very easy task for a newcomer to get acquaintance with the AIX operating system and to be up and running in no time. And it's nowhere as easy as it might be with other distributions like Linux. And this is why I'm very grateful for Andrey, because without his help, honestly, I wouldn't know where to start. And I can say that now I thanks to him, I got more exposure to AIX in a matter of days than what I managed to put together on my own. To be honest, I was particularly lucky with meeting come across Andrey. However, I was particularly unlucky, as my past experience regarding AIX on the second-hand websites here in Spain, I had 2 occasions where I had a chance to buy a used AIX server from 2 different sellers, but the moment we agreed on the price and the local pickup, both of them went AWOL on me, so it was very sad. So up until this day, I was unable to acquire an IBM Power, physical IBM Power server for myself to run AIX in my home lab, in my 42U rack. You all know I have and adore. Yeah, so therefore up until this day I have stayed without owning a physical Power architecture server. I am not giving up just yet, but let's see what happens. While there are limited amount of literature out there about AIX in a form of books when compared to Linux, AIX, well, IBM has something up its sleeve which might give them which might give AIX the upper hand. Just because there are now vast amount of books written on AIX when you compare it to Linux or Windows, IBM has something called the Redbooks, and IBM Redbooks content is designed to help you learn, adopt, and deploy solutions. Their offerings include brief documents, books, and videos. The best of all, that they are available at no charge. While IBM Redbooks are not meant to replace IBM manuals or the IBM Knowledge Center, they are very, very good, and like I mentioned, sometimes they are just a brief document or publication on a certain topic, but sometimes they are whole books and even some audiovisual content. They are best to consume with IBM manuals and the IBM Knowledge Center to get a full picture or an even broader picture. Instead, what IBM Redbooks do, that they offer a practical technical information that's not covered in product manuals. One of the advantages of IBM Redbooks publications is that you can start learning anytime, anywhere. Redbooks are available for immediate download in PDF and EPUB format, and on-demand printing is available for those who want a real hard copy to read. IBM Redbooks cover IBM and Red Hat solutions, as well as third-party and open source technologies. You can learn about OpenShift on IBM Z and Power architectures, open source IT operations management, security features in IBM Z and Linux One. cloud object storage, SAP HANA on Power Systems, agile integration, and so much more than just the AIX operating system, for example. However, I have linked one IBM Redbook in particular, which you might be handy to start for you to start to learn more about AIX and to build upon this one, this Redbook, as you progress further later on. It's an IBM Redbook about AIX 5L. To get your hands on IBM AIX, this is the part most of you have been waiting for, and this is the part which can be very useful for you if you want to get into AIX. While there are not really free ways to get your hands on AIX, because it runs on a different architecture, so you cannot run AIX on a normal x86 architecture or ARM. You need IBM Power architecture for that. Therefore, you will see later on in this episode that you can do certain emulation, even though it's not supported or legal, so to say, by IBM. However, a provider called Nutanix uses the same underlying QEMU to emulate AIX, but they have it most probably spec'd out and tuned by IBM, so it actually works on their QEMU build, and most probably it's different than what you can achieve with QEMU. And my experience with QEMU was that if you want something to learn and get more experience in AIX, then QEMU is not the way to go, unfortunately. Maybe one day it will be, but I think not just yet. It's getting there, but not just yet. So as I said, there is no really free ways to get your hands on AIX, but there are cloud solutions if you haven't wished to spend money and try out AIX. And it's not necessarily a lot of money, you will see in a second. One of the cheapest and best combination would be to sign up for IBM Cloud account, upgrade it to a pay-as-you-go tier, and use the welcome voucher of $200, which expires in 1 month after obtaining it, to run an AIX virtual machine until your money runs out. And after, you can use one of the third-party solutions on IBM Cloud from SkyTap, which is also available on the Azure Marketplace, to run an AIX virtual machine. The IBM's de facto way of running IBM Power-based virtual machines or virtual servers are Power System Virtual Server, and the third-party offering of so to say the same to run IBM Power-based virtual machines is SkyTap on IBM Cloud. So you know that there is these two different methods to do so. I would recommend that you apply SkyTap's welcome voucher, which is valid for 90 days and worth of $500 to run an AIX virtual machines for another 3 months after the initial IBM voucher of $200 runs out, using the Power Systems Virtual Server offering, IBM's de facto way of doing this. However, at this moment I cannot confirm if this is something you can do. I mean, applying to the $500 voucher of SkyTap after the 1 month credit of $200 runs out from IBM Cloud. I am still in my 1 month period, so when my money runs out, so to say, I will try and see if I can apply the SkyTap offer, which would give me another 3 months before I need to be more cautious about my usage. But as I will show you in a second with the estimated prices, um, even when I will have to pay for it, it's not gonna be as expensive as you might think. Therefore, both solutions runs your AIX operating system as a full virtual machine on an IBM based on an IBM Power Server. No matter if you go with Power System Virtual Server offering from IBM or SkyTap's cloud, SkyTap on IBM Cloud. Estimated price with IBM's Power Systems Virtual Server on IBM Cloud. The estimated price for a shared scaled out hardware, the cheapest solution running shared 0.25 virtual CPU. I have to say one physical core equals to 4 virtual CPUs on this configuration with 2 gigabytes of RAM and 20 gigabytes of Tier 3 storage in the Frankfurt data center region for me from Spain, before taxes and before any discounts, is around estimated around nearly 45 euros per month plus taxes on top, 45 plus any VAT. Now I have to say that this estimate, which includes the storage volume, the CPU and RAM, this estimate is for a full month. So if I take this 45 euros and break it down, and actually my usage would be, I estimated my usage up to, let's say, 20 hours a week, which I could spend on using AIX or learning about it. If I power it down when I'm not using it, therefore the only thing which I'm being charged for the full month is the hard drives, the storage volume, but not being charged for CPU and RAM when I'm actually not using it. Therefore, with those 20 hours per month, even as I'm being charged for the storage, this estimate would be much less. I think it would be somewhere around 5 or 6, 3, 5, 6 euros, somewhere in that range. This estimate prices, I think I will add some updates when I run a course of a full month on both solutions, and maybe I update the show notes with how much actually it costed me. But that's the estimate from the IBM's solution and the Power Systems Virtual Server on IBM Cloud. And I have to say that I think that as much as estimates go, the SkyTap ones, I pay less for the SkyTap one, because if you look at the estimated price for the third-party solution from SkyTap, then you will see that for Europe, Middle East, Africa region, which is mine, one power-based virtual machine for this 20 hours of a month with 2 gigabytes of RAM and 10 gigabytes of storage, with again the entitled CPU capacity set to the same. The SkyTap estimates me before taxes approximately $3.5 per month. I consulted SkyTap sales support, and they were kind enough to calculate me this, and the estimates and the prices are shown to you before you sign up. But you see, immediately SkyTap's offer is I'm not saying that it's half, but definitely estimates less than when I did my calculations for IBM Power Systems virtual machine from IBM than from SkyTap. So as you see, this is very affordable if you want to learn about AIX, and when you have some limited time to tinker with it, and anyway you don't need or you do not require it to run 24/7, as most of us hobbyists and home labbers, we do not. This is I think this is something we can afford, because it's cheaper than how much many of us spends on coffee in a month. So both SkyTabs on IBM Cloud Offer and IBM's own Power Systems Virtual Service server are priced similarly, as I said, but SkyTab seems to have more options to modify and interact with your virtual machine. You can boot from a supplied ISO you upload to your assets, and for example do an upgrade, which I did with Andrey's help. I was able to follow his guidance and shrink down the original 40 gigabyte of hard drive to just 10, and also upgrade the template to a newer one, and therefore using less storage space with a newer up-to-date latest AIX 7.2 technical level 5 service spec 1 image installed on it, and it cost me even less like that. Another option is to purchase some physical hardware of some older power architecture from sites like eBay, but I have to tell you that it's not cheap. Most of the time they come wiped without any OS installed disks, and even though you can try to contact IBM representative to obtain install disks for your new, so to say, server with, via its model and serial number, sometimes it takes some convincing that to have them provide you with the ISO files your server actually is entitled for. You have to know that there are some features which come baked in to the hardware itself from the factory in its BIOS, and it is important to, before you purchase any server, to get its serial number and check against the entire software and hardware enablements or entitlements that server is equipped with. Don't trust or don't expect the seller to know up to the detail everything about the power server you want to purchase, because most of the time they don't, and maybe they tell you that the server as is and it doesn't come, for example, with Power VM feature, but after you obtain the serial number, you ask them and you figure out that it comes by the enabled by the factory. So if this is the path you are interested in, and you want to learn and explore features on AIX which can only be explored on bare metal versus cloud, for example the IBM AIX's Power VM virtualization or the high availability, then it can be a great addition to your home lab. I definitely would love to have one, a Power 7 or better. So if anyone has one and don't mind contacting me, then I'm more than happy to pay for shipping and a fair price for the server itself. And for the meantime, or if it's not something you need, you can stick with the virtual machine. I will run a bit longer than usually, my half an hour, because I still have my closing thoughts to do, and it just takes a minute or two, and I think it will be a great addition to this episode. My closing thoughts on all this, that with the advent of cloud infrastructure, it has become easier to get experience with technologies previously unavailable or reserved just to a selected few, like IBM's AIX UNIX. You do not have to purchase expensive hardware and worry about electricity cost and noise if you can make a few compromises coming from the nature of virtual machines versus physical hardware. The running costs of a small Unix server with the AIX on the cloud is more affordable than it ever was, thanks to Andrey for showing me this route. I believe that my only way out or into AIX was to purchase some quite expensive hardware, big and heavy IBM Power hardware to start my journey in AIX. So thank you for Andrey for that. However, I still believe that it is necessary that companies like IBM gets rid of old habits and opens towards the community of enthusiasts or hobbyists, home lovers like myself, whom are willing to learn and experiment with operating system like say AIX or ZOS in their free time for their own benefit and perhaps to others' benefit, such as their employer, without hurting corporate profits or business intentions in the process. So I don't think that companies like IBM or HP would lose any margin of profits because there are a guy from the basement running AIX on a virtual machine or on an old AIX IBM Power server. When corporations like IBM turn themselves away from these insignificant customers who cannot afford the license fees and support contracts, big support contracts big enterprises do and what they can afford, but they tend to forget that some of these individuals might be the future C-level or mid-level decision makers. When the day comes from maybe perhaps 12 days or 12 years from now, and they need to make a professional recommendation in their new position regarding a platform or a product to implement at their workplace, they might not choose your product if they do not know first of all that it exists, or they have perhaps never had any experience with it. One thing I know for sure is for me to professionally be able to recommend something, it has to fit into the below requirements. I need to know and be familiar with the tool or solution up to some degree. I'm not saying I have to be an expert, but I need to know what it is, what it does, perhaps how it does it, and even better if I had some exposure to it myself, I can feel better offering something I know and familiar myself, or what I would spend my money on. I have a rule that I never offer or suggest something to someone I would not use myself, or I have no experience about. So I'm always amused and shocked a little bit by people who can talk about and suggest and offer things or solutions they have never experienced themselves. So I don't know how they can do that. I definitely could not. I need to have a good experience with the brand or corporation whose product it is, or who's offering the solution, because the company or the corporation behind the tool or the utility or the platform is just as important as the product itself. I need to know that it exists, this tool, solution, or operating system or platform, because if I don't, we are not even talking or thinking about it. And of course, it has to be fit for whatever requirements the business has or my client has. While solution X might tick off 1 out of 4 requirements on my list, it is certainly not enough, not even close. Just one requirement, which most probably would be in this case that something to be fit for the requirements, it doesn't mean that it's enough or even being close enough for me to recommend it. As I said, I could never recommend something I'm not familiar with, or something I've never heard of, or I never had any good experience with the brand or the corporation itself. I would never do such a thing. let alone if I am not even familiar with it, like I said, or never had the chance to be exposed to the technology or solution. How could I recommend it to others? And now imagine if I even had a bad customer experience with that certain um, corporation or brand or tool. Hobbyists, home labbers, enthusiasts are, in my opinion, no way considered free riders or someone who eats away corporate profits. In my opinion, in my understanding, these people are willing to take their time and give it for free to use and familiarize themselves with your company's product or solution, or a company's X solution and products, and not just for their own benefit, but perhaps one day for a corporation's or a client's benefit in the not so distant future. They might or might not be the next C-level decision makers, but perhaps the ones the C-level executive turns to for their professional opinion and knowledge after a sales representative made its pitch at them. And seriously, what damage a guy with a 42 UREC and some used hardware can do from his home or his basement, running anything, no matter how mission critical that piece of software is. So, but I mean that anyone seriously thinks that I could hurt anyone's profit or anyone's chance for any profit if I run ZOS, AIX, OpenVMS or HPUX in my own home lab for my own amusement at home? I seriously don't think so. And my rule of thumb for or quote I came up myself for these companies, please pay attention. It reads, treat me like I was the C-level executive you wish to present your sales pitch tomorrow. And I think it sums up very nicely how I feel about many companies' relationship with the enthusiast and home labbers communities when they quote trial licenses for I don't know, 8,000-10,000 euros for a month, and it's just a joke. Please have a look at the show notes. Have a look at the links. As I mentioned, Andrey Klyachkin's power-devops.com website's link is there. Andrey was the one who helped me being up and running with a small AIX instance in a very short amount of time. I left some other interesting links regarding AIX. I also left for those of you who are interested in AIX and QEMU, even though I think that it's somewhat working and very, very slow compared to what a cloud offering can give you for like a couple of euros, like we said, if you don't require it to run 24/7. I wouldn't bother with QEMU, but if you are adventurous and you wanna give it a try, then it's up to you. I ran around 9 minutes over of my usual time, but I think these closing thoughts worth it to put it in shape and in a whole. Put this 2-part episode and my thoughts on it as a whole, and I think it worth the extra amount of time. Thank you very much, and see you next Saturday with episode 69.